Hello, and welcome to Knights of the Night Actual Play Podcast. This D&D adventure, The Heretic, was written and run by your DM, Scott. And now, please enjoy episode 497, titled, Do You Theatrically Kick the Door Back Open? Actual play begins immediately.
Hello everyone, this is Scott, your DM for this 5e adventure, The Heretic. With me tonight, starting on my right, is...
I'm Tom. I'm playing Alder Rusha, a human male cleric of Amira, and a skill-seeking rogue.
Hi, I'm Mike, and I'm playing Marduk, a male half-orc fighter, graduate of the Academy, and an Eldritch Knight of the Fist of Amira.
I am Jim playing Grodor, a hobgoblin warlock and one of the suspect Fists of Amira, searching for truth, knowledge, and bony dice.
I'm John playing Melody, third of the exemplar family Harmony. I'm a female human cleric, ex-ambassador turned political operative by way of the Fists of Amira.
And I'm Thomas. I'll be playing Gabrielle DeAngelis, a female Aasimar paladin and a holy fist of Amira whose belief in the importance of our collective destiny drives her ever onward towards her fated oath of conduct.
And where last we left off, the group had arrived on the outskirts of the Badlands at a small town named Travail. They had brought their wagon and to a caravansary, got rooms for the night, and went to pay respects to the fallen leader of Travail, who had just recently died, Aragast Noric. When they arrived to pay their respects to his wife, Vanna had a very distinctly negative reaction to seeing, in particular, Grodor, who she said she had a premonition that he was going to steal the cherished bone dice of her husband, who lay in state. The misunderstanding escalated a bit until calmer voices, namely those of, I believe, Melody, was the one who was able to calm the situation for the most part. What ended up happening was a second meeting would be set up later on in the evening for the group to discuss why they needed these dice and to present their case to her, as she was fairly certain that, based on her premonition and her dream, that they should not have them. They were going to be stolen from her by the group. We had the Fists of Amira returning back to their room for part of the evening. From there, the group had some dinner and some drinks. Then the time had arrived for them to head back to the Temple of Amira, called the Temple of Heroes, and speak with Vanna. When they arrived at the temple, they were escorted to a room on the upper level of the temple where Vanna was at a long table with the Watch Lord of Travail in attendance as well at her right-hand side. And that's where we left off. So if you want to go ahead, there's only 4 seats and there are 5 of you, I believe. So someone's standing.
Marduk will stand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I would recommend, since this is going to be a tense negotiation, or possibly tense negotiation, to place yourselves in the room so that we know exactly what's happening. And there'll be no misunderstandings when we get to the point.
I'm going to sit in the corner.
You can indeed. I think that's the negotiation side. You can't just...
Yeah, that's the negotiation side, Grodor. You can't.
Yeah, you can't just cross the table and abandon us, I'm afraid.
I put my hands on both their shoulders.
Arms over their shoulder. Hey, boys. We're gonna
What are you
prosecute these
boys
fools.
doing here? Grodor asks.
Sure, we want the person who is accused of stealing something to be standing behind them. That makes
Behind
sense.
them in a very threatening position. That works perfectly. So,
Really tense.
yeah. You are escorted to a door which leads into a conference room. The conference room has probably about a 8 to 10 foot marble inlaid conference table. It has 6 high backed oak chairs around it. You see Vanna sitting in one of the chairs across the table from you. She has a solemn look on her face, as if she's concerned. Her hands are below the table. To be fair, she is a dwarf, so she has a chair that is made specially for her in this instance, or not made for her, but present for
her stature.
That gives her some stature at the table, so she's not down too low. And then the Watchlord is next to her, dressed in his studded leather armor and his silver hair, serious wind and sun beaten face with creases. He's an older individual who looks very serious about his duty and not very prone to idle conversation. You each take your place at the table with the exception of Marduk, who stands back a bit from the group. Once everyone gets situated, Vanna says, "Thank you for joining me here tonight. I'd like to hear more about how you were supposedly called to these dice and what you hope to achieve with them. They're a cherished family heirloom. As you can see, my husband is not even buried yet. I would just like to hear more from your side as to why I should give up a family heirloom to 6 people I've never met before and have no connection with besides a premonition or dream telling me that you would be appearing to steal the dice."
My concern is that, to your knowledge, who told you in your dream that we were even going to be here?
It was a female voice. I didn't recognize it. It was just a woman's voice, and she sounded caring and kind. I don't know much more besides that. What about your premonition? And I believe that's what you said last we spoke earlier in the day.
Yes, 2 of our members have had dreams about these dice as well. So to me, it seems that we have opponents that are contacting people in their dream state and trying to convince one way or another. They certainly don't seem to be the same approach, but as we've shared with you, we are people on a mission and specifically for Amira. And yet you tell us that you had a dream and that your husband suddenly died. Does that not sound unusual to you?
Don't we know how the husband died?
Some illness, just as some just debilitating, crippling illness. And as you all are aware, you can't raise the dead when Amira's not answering the call. So deaths right now are deaths.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And normally a pillar of a community, they could probably send someone from a larger city. Travail's not a huge town, but they would probably send someone from a larger nearby city to raise a pillar if they died before their time. But that's not possible any longer.
Mm-hmm.
You would know that, so I just wanted to kind of make that part of your information you have to work with.
But my point being that it seems that one terrible thing happened, the death of your husband. And to me, it seems unusual and fast. He was a healthy person, was he not?
He was, and no one understands the quickness of his demise more than me. I cared for him during his last days. It was a sudden, ruthless illness. He suffered for 3 long days before he finally succumbed to the illness.
So I simply don't understand how something adverse has affected you, and then it seems to me something is also affecting your dreams and affecting your mind.
And yours as well, seemingly, your group.
May we speak with the healer who tended your husband?
Not tonight. And you know it's late. It's 9 p.m., 9 bells. So when she says not tonight, it doesn't sound like it's a complete denial. It's more of a, it's 9 o'clock at night denial.
Melody leans into the table to have the next word. Many experts will be asleep tonight. If we wish to test the sanctity of our cause, I think it's best to leave it in Amira's hands. Down below in the chapel is a ring of protection around your husband.
Yeah.
It can be used to divine the will of what goes with Amira's plan. We can test the one who you dreamt about stealing them, as well as yourself, and observe what she has to say on the matter.
She looks at you and says, there is a spell protecting my deceased husband. When I enter the circle, I think a command word, and it lowers the wall of protection. That's all that is. There's nothing more
Be used to divine.
divined.
This is not a zone of truth sort of thing?
No, it is simply to protect him while he lies in state so that people could come and pay their respects without, people can be a little too forward, a little too familiar, and he deserves the respect and the distance that it entails from his subjects.
So the circle wouldn't allow anybody else within that circle, whoever knows the word of passing?
Correct. That's what that is. I wish we had something, a zone of truth that could work our way through this situation, but I think we just need to talk and see where that takes us.
I'm going to sense some motive here because I diagnose those as sanctuary ruins. They are to keep out evil. They aren't a force field that keeps people from manhandling his corpse. I get that it might have kept some unscrupulous peasantry from giving respects, but then she wouldn't need to issue a command for herself to enter. So I'm going to try to detect some motive here.
Okay, it's called insight.
Call bullshit.
So go ahead and make an insight check, please.
Whoa.
I've got a 21 to check out what she's feeding us.
That's a good roll, obviously. That tells you that either there's more than one thing at play here, or she's been misled somehow. She truly believes what she's saying. So she believes that there is a wall of force that she can command that will not allow people through. Now, is the church, another thing that the church can have, obviously, is to be, what's the word? It's not sanctified, it's
Consecrated?
consecrated, thank you. There's that as well that could be there, and perhaps she's just not referring to that because it's just common knowledge that churches are consecrated. This is an additional level of protection that she's talking about, but you get the fact that she's telling the truth. She's not trying to mislead you.
I intended to be referring to consecration as well, as that's what I remember picking it up as. Sanctuary is a different spell. It just gives additional AC during a fight, I believe.
Yeah, that's not it. The church is consecrated. In your mind, as you're looking at her and reading her body language and her eye movements and her eye contact with you, you're seeing that she definitely believes what she's saying, so there must be another layer of protection in place.
Okay. Or she believes that there is anyway.
Or she believes that there is anyways, right? There doesn't have to be. Alder.
Yes.
You just notice. You know what? Go ahead and make a perception check first, please. I'm going to see how quickly you noticed.
I rolled a 16 plus 2 and 18.
You notice that your mother's sword, who's tied off at your side, seemed to move. This is about the third time that it seemed to have moved. The first two, you put it down to the fact that you kind of were shifting in your chair and you moved your leg and you were thinking that was accounted for the movement. This time you were perfectly still, and your sword literally slightly vibrated or pulsed in its scabbard next to your leg. And that is something, I mean, you haven't had the sword for long. You've just had it since your father brought it to you at the Drunken Scholar on your graduation night.
Less than a week ago, yeah.
Yes. This has never happened before. Not even anything close to it. So that just catches you off guard while everyone's talking back and forth at the table.
I'm staring across the table at the Watchlord, and I adjust myself in the seat, and when I do, I lay my hand on the sword just to see if there's anything other than the movement that it's trying to pass on to me. But I'm staring at him in particular because I seem to think that he's the only one in the room that we don't know anything about.
Okay.
And I want to know what his behavior is, what his emotions seem to be.
It sounds to me like you want to make an insight check.
Yeah, I do. I don't know. Well, I rolled a 14 plus 2 for 16.
Yeah, good roll. He seems taciturn. He's unscrutable. His face is a blank slate. He betrays no emotion. He's looking at each one of you in turn to judge you in turn as you're looking at him. You can see him moving his eyes from one person to another in your group. He seems relaxed. He doesn't seem tense or stressed. He just seems just really hard to read. And that's what you get as you stare into him. What you get from your hand resting on the hilt of your blade is you feel a very distinct vibration, and then it stops. And then you feel another vibration, and then it stops, etc.
Is this Morse code?
She looks across the table at all of you and says, I trust my premonition. I trust the institution that trained you. You are Fists of Amira, and that holds much weight. But I feel as if I was sent a warning, and I don't know how to look at it in any other way.
I have a question for you. Was this just a vision, or was anything spoken to you?
There was a voice. It was a female voice, and it was soothing and seemingly confident, and it told me to guard the dice.
Are you guarding the dice? Right now, this moment, are you guarding the dice? I'm asking because I have a sword that is magic, and it is vibrating, warning me that something's wrong right now. And I don't know. I'm looking at the gentleman. I don't know if there's something going outside this room right now, but there's something bad happening.
Go ahead and make a persuasion check. No, not intimidation, because I don't think he's threatening anyone.
I'm not threatening anybody.
If he was trying to make the guy at the table uncomfortable and reveal something, that would be that, but he's not. Persuasion, then.
Oh,
can I help? Oh, no, I guess not.
Nothing's going to help much on that roll.
Well, I can use my inspiration.
Okay.
There you go, much better.
Much better. So I rolled a maximum of 10.
Okay. He looks at you when you said, are you protecting the dice? Are you? And you notice that her right arm flinches, almost like she was going to do something, like
reach for
flinches to something. Yes, something that was going to happen with her right hand, right arm, but she immediately caught herself and stopped herself. And she looks back at you and says, the dice are protected. I don't know what your sword is seeing or feeling, but the dice are protected.
Is she wearing any kind of jewel or ring or bracelet on the hand that is flinching?
If you remember correctly, I said when she sat at the table, her arms were below the table.
Oh.
She didn't have them up on the table.
You're right.
She had them below. So you don't know. Earlier in the day, when you met her earlier in the day, you recall that she was wearing jewelry. But you don't know whether she is right now or not, because she has never taken her hands from below the table. Either one.
You said you heard a voice telling you to guard the dice, but you also said you saw a vision specifically of Grodor stealing them. Is that true?
That is correct.
Okay.
Your hand, Alder, suddenly becomes warm, as if the metal itself is growing heated, and the pulsating grows a bit more rapid.
In your duties as High Priestess in the days before, when you received dreams, did they always come with both visions and sound, or was it one or the other before? Is this different?
I haven't had visions in a very long time. Obviously, since our Heavenly Mother has gone from us. This is the first time I have had a vision in years.
With Alder's apprehension about there being something going on, I think there's a big bay window in here.
There's also a door behind.
And a door behind us. So I'm trying my best to keep an eye on both the door and the window while we're talking and listening to the conversation as well, just to make sure nothing catches us off guard.
Okay.
Marduk, could you check outside the door?
Marduk will open the door and peer outside, do a quick scan or search or whatever perception roll if you'd like.
I feel there may have been a disconnect between the voices warning and the visions, but maybe I'm overstepping my bounds.
Well, my lady, you must understand that there's a problem here, that something weird is happening. Not only because my sword is vibrating and warning me that something is going on, but there's the fact that you had a warning about someone you have never heard of before, never met before. This came from somewhere else to tell you we were told that we need these things from something. We have never heard of the dice before. We didn't know of the dice. We didn't know they existed. We were given it from outside of our group. You were given from outside of your city that we exist. What is going on here?
Yeah, and I trust the source I got my information from. I know who it was. I don't know who gave you your warning.
What is the possible use of those dice that make it so important that gods are affecting it?
That's what worries me, is the fact that if there are such powerful beings that are trying to push people toward these dice, that what makes me worried is that if we do not protect these dice, if you don't protect them or we don't protect them, that there will be eventually a force in this city during this war which will obtain them if they have to burn the whole city down because the gods will it to be so, and that worries me.
Your husband's death is too coincidental.
Marduk, you step outside. As you can see, there's a balcony, a white marbled balcony with railings that overlook the interior chamber below. You don't see anyone besides guardsmen that are patrolling the area, the upper level. When I say guardsmen, I mean soul watch that are guarding the area. And they look to be diligent, and there doesn't seem to be any threats. You look down over the balcony to the large central chamber where Aragast lies in state, and he is still there with his hands crossed on his chest, and there doesn't seem to be anything amiss as of right this moment. Alder, your sword has gone from pulsing, vibrating at a more quick rate, warming up to your touch. It's gone to this point, it starts rattling in its sheath, almost as if it's moving of its own volition. This is still very uncharacteristic of anything that the sword has ever done for you. It's a fine silver weapon, but it's never, ever moved on its own or tried to guide your hand when you were swinging it in anger, in defense. Very, very striking. It's to the point where you almost can't ignore it right now. and it's pretty incredible.
Is this something that the rest of us can hear?
I actually stand up from the seat and step back so everyone else can see the sword. I do not have my hand on it.
You took your hand off it?
Yes. Can they still see it vibrating and shaking?
Anyone that's within 10 feet of you can tell that your sheath for your sword and your sword itself is moving on its own. It seems to be,
That's
jiggling
everyone
back
at this
and
table.
forth. Yeah, pretty much.
So I would
Right.
step back and say we should take care of whatever's going on here and then continue this with the sword and continue this conversation later. If there's something going on, we need to take care of it.
I don't know where you got that thing, but if you could step out of here for a moment, calm it down. I don't know what's going on.
I join Marduk in the hallway. I step outside. I withdraw the sword and hold it loosely in my right hand to see if it seems to want to go in a certain direction.
It seems to pull in the direction of the room you just left.
You theatrically kick the door back open?
I'm going to say the door's still open.
In the meantime, Melody says, I will trust your judgment in this affair. I would just like you to cast it again with all of us here in the most holy place in the city for us to go down to the altar and ask guidance, all of us here. I trust your judgment in asking for her. Certainly none of us are as qualified as you are.
There was a couple of speeches before she got a chance to respond as well. Before Alder's sword. No, that's okay. I just wanted to say she was taking it all in because she's not necessarily responding to every person who speaks. She's more like soaking in the information and trying to make the best decision she can is what it seems like. And she says, there must be a way. And the dice, you asked why the dice are so important. She speaks out into the hallway as Alder is and steps away for a moment and goes into the hallway. In the correct hands, they can give great portent to issues or ideas or questions that we might have. Aragast used it to rule this city wisely for many decades. That's the power of the dice. That's what I know to be the power of the dice.
Can the dice let you know what is the best choice for them right now?
She says, perhaps we should put this in the hands of the dice. Perhaps that is the best suggestion I've heard tonight.
Well, let me dust off my holy bone skill.
I'm better than you.
Okay, Alder, what are you doing?
I'm actually taking my scabbard off my waist.
You had the sword. You were holding the sword.
Yes, I am.
It was warm to your hand. It was pulsing, vibrating. When you picked it up and took it out of its sheath in the hallway, it stopped moving about of its own accord momentarily. But then you felt the pull and the tug towards the room.
All right, but my point is I'm taking my scabbard off of my belt. I'm putting it over the sword that I'm holding in my hand. The reason I'm doing this is I'm stepping back into the room, and I don't want to be holding a sword stepping back into the room. And then, is the sword still giving some tug in a specific direction? Because what I'm doing is I'm walking into the room and going towards Melody, which is closer to that side of the table. So it's if it's pointing in a specific direction, I'll be able to identify who it's pointing at.
When you resheathe the sword before you step into the room. Okay, go ahead and make a perception check, please. Because you're doing a lot of different things, and there's something that you may have picked up on and something you may not have picked up on.
I rolled a natural 1.
A natural 1, which when you sheathe the sword in the hallway, the door is still open, but you're not really focused on the interior of the room. You're focused on getting the sword into the sheath. That's what your main attention is. When you slide the sword into the sheath, you immediately feel it start to move again. It's not pulsing. It ceases pulsing and goes to the point where it's literally jiggling back and forth as if it wants to be, I don't know what it wants.
It wants to get out.
Yeah, it seems to be. I think that's a pretty easy deduction to make, is that it wants to be removed from its scabbard, and it's making you very aware of that fact.
Okay. If it's not going to give me the answer I want, then I take it back out and I step into the room and let it point where it wants to point. This could be bad.
You step into the room with the drawn sword, which raises the eyebrows of Vana. She kind of raises her eyebrows up a little bit like, are you have the audacity to threaten the high priestess of Amira?
Melody too.
The Watchlord immediately, he was someone who was unscrutable, but he immediately puts his hand to his waist and draws out his rapier, which is what he's carrying.
Gabriel crosses her arms across the table to pin his hand underneath, and says, Alder.
Okay, so that will be something like let's say it's a strength check, and he'll make it against a strength or a dexterity check and back. So kind of like a grapple almost.
Sure.
If I can, while he's figuring that out.
Oh my god.
It is the night of low rolls.
Oh boy.
Sorry to
This
hear
is
that.
the first time I've rolled a 1 this adventure.
Oh, a natural one.
Yeah, I have an advantage. I'm going to spend it because I don't want to, get fucking
Inspiration.
inspiration. Thank you. You're right.
This is the meeting of inspiration spending for sure. Go ahead.
Jeez.
It's more reasonable.
Okay. He
Total 12.
has a high dexterity and not a super high strength. So he is going to make a dexterity check in response to try to wrest his arm free as you try to pin his arm to the table. He's going to go ahead and make a roll. He rolled a 10 and his dexterity is +3, so he rolled a 13.
Dang.
So he is able to quickly move. You kind of grab him and you don't have a really good grip, and he slides his hand quickly to the side and through and starts to stand up. Right at this moment, Alder, you see hovering in the air about the size of a fist, a glowing orb, maybe 8 feet in the air, that you was not there before. Maybe 5 feet behind Vana. Again, it wasn't there when you looked seconds ago, but when you draw the sword out of its sheath, it points in that direction, right above. So you're pointing the sword right at Vana. And
No, actually, I'm jumping up onto the table and pointing above her head at the orb.
Alder.
I am making it clear that it is way higher than she is seated.
you're pointing at the orb. Are you saying anything?
Please tell me that everyone else sees that.
Go ahead and make a persuasion check to see if they can see in your body language, in your words, that you're not aggressively charging towards her and leaping up on the table to stab her in the face, that there's something more going on here.
The sword is pointed way above her head, and it's on a roll of 10.
She pushes the chair back away from the table as you run towards it.
I don't run towards it. I take a few steps and jump up on it. Yes, sure. But
yeah, I wasn't sure. I thought you were doing it. Look, everyone, like you were doing it with very animated way to handle it. But if you're doing it more calmly, then she slides her chair back as you move forward and step up onto the table. The Watchlord points his rapier right towards your chest and says, "Not one step further." And he does look to where you're pointing, and she looks over her shoulder, and everyone else looks where Alder is pointing, and there is nothing there.
You said she pushed away from the table. Can we see her hands?
You're in the hallway right now, so you have to move yourself back in.
Dory. Oh, okay.
Oh, wait, we can do that.
I mean, you certainly would have when Alder drew his blade.
Right. We can say you're back in the room.
I use my divine senses. I want to know if there's evil here.
I ignite the light of the spear. I see the tableau before me.
Are you pulling out the spear?
Well, it's a spear. I'm just...
It's hard to keep it away.
Carrying it? I didn't know if it was sheathed, like on a back sheath or something.
No, I'm sorry. I would have been standing at parade rest at the door, being attention, because this is an official.
Yeah.
I was being militaristic and proud of being a fist.
Yeah, we just bring our
He has an aspect about that. You should give him an inspiration.
Okay, point.
That is good. But I'm not giving him one yet.
Even if not, I can summon my spirit of the hand instantly anyway.
your spear of Amira lights up.
Right.
Nothing is revealed to you, though.
That's fine.
You don't see anything that Alder's pointing at, but it is glowing.
Right.
And
the reason I was going to do that is I'm about to say, everybody stand down. This is a temple to our goddess, and we are all children of Amira here. So let's just take a moment, listen to what Alder is saying, but let's not attack each other.
And I say, I see nothing, Alder. Does anybody have a detect evil spell, or maybe I should do detect magic?
Gabrielle's opened up her divine senses to detect the presence of strong evil or powerful good. And then she says, Cronor, can't you detect magic with your crazy wizard ways?
Gabrielle, you open up your senses, and you do not detect the presence of strong evil, as it says in the first sentence. There is no strong evil present right now in this room, unequivocally. That takes us to, I just want to go in order of who is speaking. You wanted to do something, Grodor?
It would take 10 minutes, but I can do a detect magic spell.
You only have it as a ritual.
Just lamely.
Yep.
Okay. The Watch Lord says, have you gone mad? To you, with his rapier still pointing towards you as you point in the air towards something that is not there, but you see perfectly clearly. It is a glowing orb of iridescent light the size of a fist. There's no doubt in your mind.
I speak to the Watchlord. Sir, I transfer the sword to my left hand, which is closer to him, and hold the hilt towards him. Take my sword. You'll see it. I'm holding it out towards him.
Roll
Okay.
persuasion.
I don't need to persuade him to take my sword. Take my sword.
He wants to take his sword.
That's
so
right.
he takes your sword with his offhand. Melody, go ahead and make an insight check, please.
I did.
And what
I rolled a 16.
What you're questioning, he's animated, but not to the point where you think
That Alder has become possessed. I have rolled to determine if Alder was possessed. There's some strange shit going on. He walks in with a sword. I mean, I trust my buddy, but...
Yeah, it's unusual, but you don't see the blank look in his eyes of someone who's possessed. You see him animated like...
and then
like
he offers the blade
people
to another person, which that's
right.
very in character.
Sure.
As opposed to someone who wants to start something, so...
As soon as you hand the blade off, Alder, it disappears. And
yes, but I'm staring at the Watchlord.
Right.
I'm pointing where I saw it.
He looks around and says, "Milady, what is that?" And right around this time that all of this is going down, you had walked through the Redlands a day prior. And when you walked through the Redlands, there was this phenomena that would occur as you were walking through the blistering heat. And it would be where the air itself would seem to bend and waver with the heat. Kind of like almost like a mirage that you would see in a desert, but it was in the Badlands. And so you had just recently seen this. What you see is right around where Alder's pointing and where the Watchlord is looking, right around that area, about 5 feet behind Vanna, the air seems to quiver and to waver like you're in the heat. It's a situation that you definitely haven't seen indoors at any time in any of your lives. It's very unusual. Then a form comes through. It appears through the wavering air and enters the room 5 feet behind Vanna. The form is what looks to be a female of middle years. Bald as far as you can tell, although she's wearing a robe and her face is concealed for the most part. You could see that she's a female. You can see that she's a little bit older in age. But the robe hood comes down right about to her eyes. The robe itself is red, and it has sleeves of white, and on the sleeves and on the hem of the robe below, touching the ground, are runes in a language that I don't know that any of you can speak. We'll go through and see what everyone speaks, but I think it's runes or letters in a language that you don't comprehend.
What species is she?
She seems to be human. She has her right hand out as she comes through the wavering air. On her right hand is a tattoo of a runed circular symbol. And as she comes through and her hand outstretched, words on her lips that you can't hear because she wasn't present until just this second, a wave, a cloud, if you will, of daggers appear in Vanna's area. And she is impaled upon multiple daggers. To your point, Marduk, you were wondering if you could see her hands. Her left hand was open. Her right fist was clenched. As she falls to the ground, daggers piercing her back, her hand opens and a pair of dice fall to the floor. I want to thank our listeners for joining us tonight for this session. Hope you enjoyed it. And thank you to the group. Everyone, great job tonight, as usual. I say that every night, but it is true. Great role playing. It was a tense negotiation, and you guys handled it really well. So we'll see everyone next week and see where this takes us. Good night.
Thank you for listening to Knights of the Night Actual Play Podcast. If you'd like to send us a question, comment, or feedback, you can reach us in a number of ways, including Twitter at KOTN_podcast or by emailing us at feedback@KOTNpodcast.com. And don't forget the iTunes reviews. We also have a Facebook page which can be found at facebook.com/KOTN.podcast. While on Facebook, you can join like-minded folks at our fan page at facebook.com/groups/KOTN-fan. And lastly, there's our blog at KOTNpodcast.com, where there's an Amazon link on the right-hand side for those of you who'd like a more steady way to help us pay the bills. Or if you live outside the U.S., you can help by donating to our Patreon page at patreon.com/KOTN. And please remember to join us next week for more mystery and adventure.
One of my first thoughts was how are we gonna steal this from this morning lady when we get to town? It was one of my first thoughts is how are we gonna steal this from this morning lady and find it and steal it? And then I was like thinking during the week, I'm like, no, we're the freaking Fists of a Mirror. We don't go stealing shit. We should go up and explain to her, hey, we had some visions and
God wants
we need this damn thing and we should. I said,
God
we don't
wants us to have this.
And if diplomacy doesn't work, then we go from there. But I said diplomacy would be the first way to go. But I was thinking we're going to go in there and say, hey, we're here for the thing. God, we're on a gift mission from God, and put on our dark sunglasses and see what happens.
I thought what would be really interesting would be if you guys failed at your roles and she said no. And what would be the next step? Do you defy the visions and just go about your way and say, sorry, we tried, it didn't work? Or would you actually do something that was borderline shady and try to get them another way? So it's going to be really interesting I thought it would have been more interesting if she'd said no, but you guys just did a good job of role playing and she had her vision, but you guys also had a mirror and the fact that you're Fists of a Mirror and you had soul shards that are glowing, and you've got some things on your side that weighed in and allowed her to at least hear you out. She might still say no, which then will make it interesting again to see where we go from here.
Right.
But it'll be an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Having visions of us stealing it is a pretty good way to do it too, because it's one of the few things that Gabrielle wouldn't really have a problem with. God
Really?
sent a vision of us jacking the car. What do we do?
We steal that car. God said so.
Steal that car, I guess. Doesn't make sense to me, but God asked me to.
It must be justified.
Why is the rogue the most
Moral.
Yeah.
I'm pretty fucking moral, but when
Well-
God sends me a vision and tells me to be immoral, that makes it moral, doesn't it?
And as much as my patron says this is something we really need to have, you need to have this, we absolutely must have it. I'm also in the mindset of when your patron or a God tells you what to do, I'm a master of my own destiny. I'll do what I think is right, not what they think is right.
Ooh, that would have been interesting to see what
That's
her response would have been,
Yeah.
or would be
Different
still,
attitude.
because it's still a possibility,
Yeah.
if you throw her some attitude. So that'll be interesting, again, if things don't work out with Vanna, to see how your patron, how the
Right.
Lady of Ash responds to a direct, very direct, I believe her line was, acquire them by any means.
Mhm.
So,
That's a refusal.
yeah, that's going to be pretty interesting.
No room to wiggle there.
Not much. He just seems, is it taciturn? Is that the term? He just seems,
A term.
yeah, that's the term I'm looking for.
There's a shotgun under the table.
What was...
Jim, I just want to clarify that Grodor has Eldritch Sight, presumably, that lets him detect magic at will without expending a spell slot or material components, and detect magic lasts 10 minutes. It doesn't take 10 minutes to cast.
I used to have it, and then I moved it into a ritual and put it in my book of whatever. So now
I
it's
see.
a ritual that I have to do
That
from a
doesn't-
book.
Yeah, that does indeed take 10 minutes.
Thank you, Melody. That is,
Other possible titles for this episode available for voting on our Facebook fan page were The Knight of Low Rolls, A Pair of Dice Fall to the Floor, Is That Morse Code? Crazy Wizard Ways, and Deaths Right Now Are Deaths.